I'm going to read chapter 9 in Pulling Together. Sock Money. September the 24th came up clear. Matthew pulled a sock from under his mattress. He counted his money again. $1.60. He fell back on the bed and stared out the window. He needed 40 cents more. He would get 10 more from Mr. Reed. That left 30 whole cents. And there was only this one more day to get it. Lord, he said, please let me get enough money, if it be thy will. Amen. He went down to breakfast. His mother was frying potatoes. Just a few more minutes, she said. Drink some milk. Matthew pulled the puzzle off the hook. He twisted the chains and laid the horseshoes one atop the other. The ring dropped off. It spun on the table and fell over. It wobbled to a stop. I got it, he said. Good for you, said Addie. Matthew ate his potatoes and then stood up to leave. He put the ring back on the puzzle. He turned the puzzle over in his hands. Then he took it with him. He worked the puzzle twice more on the way to the bank. It seemed simple now. Matthew polished the brass knobs on the door of the bank. He leaned in and breathed on the knob. It fogged over. Then he wiped a cloth back and forth across it. He stepped back to see. He worked on the latch until the shadows told him to go. At recess, Joe Parker got up a game of hoop. He ran down the lane behind a huge metal ring. He smacked it with a stick to keep it rolling. Matthew sat in the shade. He undid his puzzle. 2 girls came to watch him. Soon an older girl came. Can I try? She said. Matthew handed it over. Suddenly, Joe Parker was behind them. His hair was ruffled from playing hoop. He smoothed it down with one hand. The girl tried the puzzle a few ways and gave it back. It's too hard for me, she said. She smiled at him. She walked away from the tree. Joe rolled his hoop across in front of her and ran after it. The day dragged. Matthew thought the time would never pass. At last, Miss Hall dismissed them. He bolted for the door. Matt, said Joe, wait up. Matthew slowed, but did not stop. Matt, I was wondering, would you sell your puzzle? Matthew stopped. He held up his horseshoes and looked at them. This? Yeah, said Joe. I'll give you a dime. Matthew stretched the puzzle out. The ring hung in the center. He tipped one shoe up and the ring slid into the other shoe. Give me 2 dimes, he said, and I'll show you how to work it. Done, said Joe. The window sills of the bank shone with white paint. The railing by the steps did too. The brass knobs gleamed. The steps were swept. Matthew held out his hand for the last of his money. "A splendid job, son," said Mr. Reed, "and here's a tip." He dropped an extra dime in Matthew's hand. It shone so that Matthew thought it must be brand new. He took it between his thumb and finger to see if it were real. He could hardly believe it. "Thank you, sir." "You're welcome. Will I see you at the fair tomorrow?" "I hope so," said Matthew. The sides of the barn were now partly old wood and partly new. The roof was all new. Every day different neighbors came to work. Sam Johnson came almost every day and stayed until almost supper. Matthew went right away to put his money in the sock. He poured all the coins out on the bed and counted them. $2 even, he said. He scooped up the money and dropped it down into the sock. The jingling made his heart swell. He stuffed the sock under his mattress. He did his chores and whistled his father's tune. He could hear Luke and his father calling to each other as they worked. "Supper!" Addie said from the porch. Matthew lifted his soup spoon carefully. Corn and bits of chicken floated in the broth. He took it into his mouth without slurping. "John," said Addie. John Briggs looked up. "Have you thought any about the boys going to the fair?" she said. Matthew put his spoon down, but he did not let go of it. John Briggs looked from Addie to Matthew to Luke. "Papa," said Matthew, "there's a horse pull." John leaned back in his chair. He smiled a little. And, said Matthew, "I thought maybe Ben and Dolly could win." John Briggs looked at his wife. She nodded toward Matthew. "Please, Papa, there's a $50 prize, and then we could keep Dolly." John Briggs said nothing. Luke and Addie and Matthew sat still, waiting. John Briggs rubbed his hand across his chin. "Matt, I'd like to, but there's always a fee for such things, and no matter how small it is, we haven't got it right now." Matthew tucked his chin down and looked up at his father. "Yes, we do." John Briggs' eyebrow went up. "How?" Matthew left the table and ran upstairs. He came back carrying the sock. He untied it and rolled the coins out on the table. "I've been working some," he said. John Briggs put out his hand and touched a dime. He looked at his wife again. She smiled and tilted her head at him. Matthew watched. His heart tripped. "Well," said his father, "maybe we could try it."